Hi, I'm Rick Drew, one of the writers for the original MacGyver, on the MacGyver podcast with Mac Jackson.
Hi, I'm Richard Dean Anderson.
Name's MacGyver.
Colonel Jack O'Neill, SG-1.
My name is Pratt, Ernest Pratt.
I always get a happy, tingly feeling when I see those guys.
Name one contract that I failed to execute.
MacGyver.
Oh, here we go.
You're a target. And I don't intend to miss.
Over my rotting corpse. I'm sorry, did I say that out loud? Glowing eyes, cliche behavior, evilness, that kind of thing.
Is mental illness contagious?
You think?
You can do anything you want to do if you put your mind. Well, you do have a penchant for pulling brilliant ideas out of your butt. Head. Out of your head when we need them. Oh, the stuff's already here. I just find a different way to use it.
I like your attitude.
Permission to take a team through the Stargate, sir.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of the MacGyver podcast. I'm your host, Mac Jackson, and today we have a special guest who I'm thrilled to talk to. Anybody who's listened to any episode before, you'll hear us go on about the things that set MacGyver apart, other than the MacGyverisms, and Rick being one of them, but also how great the writing was, the attention to detail, the pacing. And so I'm thrilled to have Rick Drew on, one of the writers from the series. And I believe it was season 3 you started, correct?
That's right, yeah.
Boom. Well, welcome. I'm thrilled to have you on. Thanks for doing this.
Well, thanks for asking.
The moment I saw you on Facebook, I'm like, oh, here's a guy I'm dying to talk to.
Well, I can't remember why, but I think something came up. I hadn't joined any of the MacGyver fan things on Facebook. For some reason, it caught my eye, and I thought people might have a few questions, and it might be interesting. And it's always nice to think that something you did that long ago is still of interest to anyone.
Oh, yeah.
So I just threw myself into the ring a bit, and the fan base is so kind and interested. It was nice just to have conversations with people who care about something you did before most of them were born.
Yeah, well, I think I saw it on the MacGyver Online's Facebook page. And
right.
Because there's a bunch of them. I have one for the podcast, and it's a group type of thing where, anybody can contribute. And, yeah, I noticed people jumping right on there with all their questions.
Yeah, it was fun. I don't always have the answers, but the questions are fun.
And, it really speaks volumes to how timeless the show is.
Yeah, and I think, of course, nobody ever anticipates that's what you're going to do. I had an interchange with a fan for the show, I think it was last weekend, where we were, I just said, in all honesty, like I just said to you, it's nice that anyone is interested in something I did so long ago, that we did so long ago. And his response was really touching, and he said that, that these shows do become a part of your life, and they kind of become sort of like markers of your childhood, or if you're a teenager, or whatever, you remember where you were or who you were when you first saw something that you found entertaining or memorable. Mm-hmm. And I reflected that back before the days of VCRs and DVDs and any form of recording, as a writer for television, what you were writing just disappeared. It had no afterlife. You do reruns and perhaps syndication if there's enough of them, but basically you're filling a jar full of fireflies and throwing it in the air.
Wow, that's a good analogy.
Well, it's just, and you realize so much of your work just disappears.
Yeah.
It used to, but now, of course, not only are people still watching, but I still get 1/6 of a cent for every BD that has an episode of mine on, which I really had.
Well, it's something too because I mean we've said it so much. Obviously, I'm doing a podcast about the shows, and so that says it. But you're right. Television is typically there just to entertain. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be inspiring. So when you get a show such as MacGyver, it could change your life. I mean, I know personally it's been like the bedrock of who I am as a person because of not just, yes, there's the explosions and the MacGyverisms, but it's the inspirational character. If you could do a show and okay, when it's over, that was the end of it. But in the case of, say, MacGyver, you're inspired to do more and to be more,
Well, I know you're the one asking the questions, but what is it about the show for you that gives it that kind of a legacy for your interest?
Well, you can ask me any question at any point. Yeah, this is definitely, it's a conversation. I didn't want you to worry about that. But, okay, well, for me, right from the beginning, there was a charm about the character. Of course, I always say the MacGyverisms get you in the door, but it's Richard Dean Anderson that keeps you on the couch. If he,
Absolutely,
first and foremost, wasn't believable or so sweet and so good, you wouldn't care. Like I remember being a kid and I always say, like, I love the Fonz and I love Henry Winkler, but Henry Winkler is not the Fonz. The Fonz had a certain bravado about him. But when you see MacGyver, I remember first thinking, okay, I'm not going to be fooled again. Let me see how much of this guy is a good guy, because what I'm seeing on the screen is pretty inspirational.
But how do you make that determination when you're watching it as a kid when you don't have the opportunity to meet the actor or to know that?
Well, you make sure you stay up late and watch any sort of interview, or you read any sort of interview, anything that would have him in it. I thought, okay, I think I'm a pretty good judge of character. I can tell, where the line is. And
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to go ahead.
Well, I just you reminded me of the very first time I met him myself.
Go ahead.
And I was just hired on the show, and I literally hadn't met him yet. And the show was already in the first, I don't think it was quite shooting the first episodes yet when I was hired. And he was having a conversation out in the parking lot. No, we must have been shooting because there was an episode where he used a screwdriver to start a motorcycle.
Okay.
And the conversation he was having is you need to tell me absolutely that no one can do this at home because I don't want to see anybody getting hurt or doing something stupid. And so that was my first introduction to him, was just that I always say if anybody asks me, and because you've met him,
that
he's the real, that if you imagine what you hope he would be like and then multiply it by 10, and that's the kind of person he is.
Right.
And the success of the show, I would say 90% of it was him. Mm-hmm. Just his personality and his sincerity and his values and how that synchronized with the values of everyone else.
And it really is lightning in a bottle.
Totally, and it's like anything is. And Henry too. The fact that Henry Winkler is one of the producers. Mm-hmm. A lot of what made the show as good as it was, even though he wasn't involved all the time in the development of the episodes. Whenever he was involved, it was always a welcome contribution, and he was I'm still in touch with Henry. I saw him up here just last year. Just a wonderful human being.
Yeah, I had the pleasure of meeting him too, and he was very sweet to me.
And it's real, it's not like Hollywood friendly. You can tell the difference. I mean, it's just who Henry always has been. And I think it's like I heard somebody say once about lottery winners, that winning a lottery doesn't change you. It just makes you more of who you are.
Right.
So, idiot, before you win the money, you're going to just be an idiot with money. and I think that's true of people who become famous. If they're already solid people with reasonable values and both feet on the ground, then they're not dramatically badly impacted.
Right.
They handle it better, I think, than people who are, doing it for all the wrong reasons.
Mm-hmm. Well, another thing that made it so crucial and important to my development was, and you were a big part of this, in the episode, it's taking the quiet moments to be just as important as the big explosive moments. Like, it's showing Rick at home, making himself a smoothie or something before the episode even happens. Like, those little moments are, he's alone. So,
yeah,
and there's no conversation. I always use the example of him pulling up, the credits are rolling, or even not. It could be halfway through an episode. Car pulls up, he gets out, walks across a parking lot, walks onto the front porch of a place, and takes the time to look in a window. That's 3 minutes maybe, and there's no conversation, and you're just as fascinated as you would be if there was a guy chasing him.
Yeah, and I don't think TV shows do that anymore.
Exactly.
I know just TV shows. And that's the kind of thing that you don't do. You can look at the old shows from the 60s and stuff, and an old episode of Dragnet, half of it was them getting in and out of their car and walking up sidewalks.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it gave some breathing room to shows that were, it was a different attitude and a different pace to life. And so I think it kind of reflected the entertainment to some degree as well.
And it also, I think, bumps up the more explosive moments. Like, and
yeah.
I use the remake as a perfect example. If it's go, 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 well, then it flatlines. There's no interesting arc, but with well-paced shows, you get to, like you said, breathe.
Yeah, and I honestly wanted to like the new version. And I don't want to get too much into it, but I know we had we tried to be entertaining, but we also, without overstating it too much, tried to make every episode about something where there was a natural opportunity to do so.
Exactly.
Like my Blood Brothers episode about gun control that we got in a lot of trouble over.
Yeah, but wonderfully in trouble for. Like, if you're going to cause trouble, that's the right thing to, Yeah.
Ultimately very satisfying in the long run. But
yeah.
Because for people who don't know, that the NRA came after us because we had the audacity to say the idea that children playing with guns was a bad idea.
Right. Like, that's insane to me.
Yeah, it was insane to us. But we took advantage of it and got a lot of free publicity out of it. So
yeah. Things. Well, let's get into it then, because I saw that list and you are responsible for a lot of great character development based on your episodes.
Responsible with a team of very talented people.
And we did an episode, I don't know if you listened to it, but it's one called The Showrunner's Oath. And it's all about how basically everybody has to be on the same page. And you can tell when there's no ego involved. For example, obviously MacGyver. Stargate SG-1 was the same way, where everybody knew the project was bigger than them. Everybody from the actor down to the caterers, they all,
That's true. Yeah.
And this show is, you could tell it wasn't about getting ahead of yourself. It was, what is our main goal?
Yeah, and I'd say a lot of that came from Steve Downing, our exec producer, who was our showrunner, because he had a history of, he was deputy chief of police for Beverly Hills. He got his start as a writer while he was still a working police officer, not unlike Jack Webb. In fact, I may be wrong, but I'm pretty sure Jack Webb gave him his first break.
Oh.
He was famously, Joe Friday in Dragnet.
Sure.
Back in the ancient days of television. And but Steve wrote all kinds of stuff, a range of stuff, not just cop shows. But I think a lot of the success of the show has to do with Steve and his real broad interest in all kinds of stuff and of course, his values.
Yeah. Yeah, and it shows all the way through. It's consistent from beginning to end. A lot of people say, well, in a lot of shows, the pilot might be different from the rest of it because nobody quite found their feet yet.
The pilot was a disaster.
I
had not, but even the director took his name off the pilot.
I know. That's a story I wish I knew about, because I remember hearing that, and I'm wondering, because it ended up perfect, but I'd love to know what had happened,
I actually wrote an article for a magazine in the UK about it years ago. I'll send it to you. I talked to the creator of MacGyver, David Lee's Upsall, and because it always occurred to me while we were working, this guy's got his name on every episode, but how come we're doing all the heavy lifting?
Yeah, he only wrote the pilot, and that was it.
And so I talked to him. I tracked him down and had a conversation with him about how he became involved with the show and the origins of the character and stuff. So you might find that interesting. I'll send that on.
Yeah, please do. I love that.
Yeah, nice guy.
He seems to be.
For a movie.
Sorry?
He had planned to do a MacGyver movie when I talked to him many years ago. And because through some bookkeeping error at Paramount, even though they owned the show, he owned the character. So he maintained the rights to the character. And I think, I'm guessing entirely, but I think because of the MacGruber movie, it killed the MacGyver movie.
Sure. Yeah, I get that. I wish that movie hadn't happened.
Yeah, me too. It's okay as a Saturday Night Live thing.
Once. I always say it's a one-joke skit, and then that should be it.
No, I couldn't even make it through the movie. It was just stupid.
You and me both. Yeah, you and me both. I tried, and I just went, you know what? Being the MacGyver guy that I am, I think I have to try and watch it the way I watched I suffered through the remake series, but I just couldn't do it. Like you said, you get to a point, you go, done, I'm good.
Well, with the new version, what annoys me is not only does it not have the values of our original show, which is what the show was ultimately about, but the names of characters just so randomly, and to have absolutely just to call somebody Jack Dalton and not have any of the charm or fun.
Exactly.
The character is just make your own show and do something else. Why poison the well?
We always say it's very pandering to the audience.
But who is it for? Because it's certainly not going to appeal to the fans of the original show.
Exactly.
Because really like the show who doesn't recognize anything in the new one. So why?
Right. Even the character himself is nothing like Richard Dean Anderson. Like, he's not charming.
So even the way the MacGyverisms are presented, I haven't watched anything past the first season, but it was so dumbed down.
Right.
That it was like, I don't know. Anyway, let's not talk about that.
Happy thoughts. All right, so So you studied film first.
I worked. I went to the American Film Institute for a short time, but I'd been writing since I was 16 in high school. So back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, and I I worked on the first Superman movie as an assistant director.
Get out of here!
No, and another film called Days of Heaven, which won an Oscar for cinematography,
Wow.
and an all film called Buffalo Bill and the Indians. So I worked behind the scenes as a production assistant and assistant director before I was able to fully pursue my writing career.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Because I grew up I'm still in Canada, obviously, but I grew up the next province over in Alberta, and they just happened to be, when I got out of high school, start making a lot of movies right where I lived. And so I got lucky, and we did all of the Smallville stuff. We shot for 6-7 weeks and didn't do any scenes with Christopher Reeve, but we did just about everything else.
Sure. Oh yeah, the stuff before he goes off on his journey.
Yeah.
Huh.
Right. So that was one of the things that they appreciated when I did start working on MacGyver. I had written other TV shows, Canadian shows before that, but one of the things that helped keep me there for 3 years was that because I was familiar with production, I was able to make whatever script came in shootable. Just because of my experience as an AD, I had a sense of, well, if we do things this way or that way, and working with the director and with the production, I ended up doing a lot of the production rewrites in addition to my own scripts.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons I didn't write as many of my originals, is because we wanted me to do so much of the production rewrite stuff.
So they're like, you know what? Just write something.
Well, not exactly.
It's like he's doing it all anyway. Let's just go ahead and write something.
I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying that, that was a particular skill that I had that was useful for that production, because it was a very complicated show to make. Because most TV shows have more regular characters and more regular sets. MacGyver, when we were making it, had only his houseboat set and Pete's office, where there were only 2 standing sets. And every week we either had to build a lot of stuff or shoot outside of the studio. Mm-hmm. So it was really like making a movie every week. And so we always had the main unit and a second unit and a stunt unit and an insert unit, and all that had to be coordinated.
Woof.
It was a huge thing to do.
Oh yeah. Plus you got to film it within a week, right?
Well, we would shoot. I'm trying to remember now. It depended. Sometimes we'd shoot extra days, but mostly it seems to me that we would shoot 8 days, 8 or 9 days, depending on how much second unit there was, how much actual action could be done by a second unit, which means, like if you're shooting a car chase or something, you don't need to tie up 100 people doing that. You have a small splinter unit that goes and shoots that sort of thing. And we would do a lot of extreme locations too, where we would be in the mountains, in the snow, or out on the water, and all over the place. So just getting into that logistically was challenging. And the nice thing, it was because a lot of shows shoot in Vancouver now.
Right.
Most everybody, most of the CW shows shoot here for sure. But and Stephen Cannell's company moved up here to shoot while we were doing MacGyver and opened a studio as well. But the difference with the MacGyver move was they didn't come up specifically to save money. They moved up here because they wanted to get more bang for their buck. They didn't spend less. They probably spent more, but they got a heck of a lot more because of the range of locations we could do here that they couldn't do in LA.
Oh, okay. I always thought it was because of the money.
Well, that was a part of it, obviously, but at that time there wasn't that big a difference. Huh. This is Violet. My cat is just, in case anyone's wondering.
Aw. It's precious.
Yeah, she is. Now she's going to be... So yeah, that was really their main impetus. Of course, it was important that it was, a money-saving thing, but they got way more because they couldn't do a lot of the things that we can do in Vancouver.
Well, just for the forest set alone has got to be worth $1 million.
Well, yeah. In fact, there's still a cabin that is used constantly near where I live here in North Vancouver that they still call the MacGyver cabin.
Oh, really?
And it was because we built it there many years ago.
This would be the Widowmaker?
Possibly. It might have been that or the Endangered. I can't remember.
Okay. Huh. All right. Well, let me see. Was your first episode Thin Ice?
That's the first one I wrote, yeah.
And what inspired that? I assume it was Rick's love of hockey.
Absolutely. That was a big part of it. And also because it was this year of the Winter Olympics. It was in the States. I can't remember where. Was it in New York?
Boy, that year, it's possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, Rick was involved with the indirectly with the Olympic team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he became like assistant coach or whatever for years.
And so we just wanted to do a hockey episode. It was just one of the things we wanted to do. And so, since I was the only Canadian, that task fell to me. And so that was my first one. But even then, we made it about violence in hockey, not just about hockey.
Yeah. I just watched it right before we got talking with my kids. And just to, I know them all by heart, but I figured since it was probably your first, I would watch it to maybe see some things I overlooked,
Yeah.
And it's not, it's funny because it's odd in the way that it's not big on, action. He's being a coach,
No.
but it's the moral debate that is your hook.
Yeah. And I think that was another thing that made the show unique. And I think it's something else that the new one doesn't do. It was never a mission of the week show.
Right.
Sometimes just be what's going on in his life. Sometimes he could be in East Germany. Sometimes he could be, in the Arctic. Mm-hmm. I mean, you didn't really know. It was actually almost like an anthology with only two continuing characters. It was very much like an anthology because you could tell just about any story within the framework of it, in part because of the nature. We never pinned down what the Phoenix Foundation was.
Right.
We intentionally kept it vague because it allowed us to say, well, this week we have a government contract, or this week we have a corporate contractor. So it allowed you many doors that you could enter into the Phoenix Foundation to find a story and then just use that as a springboard into whatever you wanted to do.
And the fact that he wasn't a guy with a desk job who had to be there Monday through Friday. He was freelance, so he could say yes or no depending on what the mission was.
Or he could bring the foundation in himself if it was something that it was of interest to him that he felt strongly enough to engage them.
Yeah, exactly. Which was a nice mix.
Yeah.
Let me think. I'm trying to see if I could go in order, but I wonder. All right, I'll just go down your list and we'll talk about each one.
Okay.
Easy Target.
Right.
Easy Target, I'll tell you before you tell me, but what makes this stand out for me is two things. One, they're not on a mission. They're just coming back from a skiing trip. And two, they're fighting. Pete and Mac always got along, and to see them bicker,
Yeah, that was. And part of that was, that's the other thing that we have to address is how great Dano was.
Wasn't he?
I mean, he was as an actor, he was a Swiss Army knife. Whatever tool you needed, he had it.
Yeah. Well, when I was.
And he was just such a lovely person and so talented.
when I was talking to Michael DeBar, I met him last year, and
I love my,
right, and he had said, the thing about Dana is, because I had said he's the only guy who could pull off certain lines of dialogue without sounding forced or, God forbid, corny, because how many times can he say, MacGyver, what are you doing with that thing, without sounding goofy? And he
can offer the exposition we needed. You could give him, like, one of the few things that not consistently, but he would always flag in the script, Rick, was that he didn't like what he called laying pipe. He didn't like it if we gave him expositional dialogue.
Because it wasn't natural.
No, and it's hard to make expositional dialogue sound natural as an actor or as a writer, because it is purely information.
Sure. What Michael had said was, he had a wonderful way of making everything sound natural. Even, like you said, the exposition stuff. You just go, yeah, all right, I believe it. That's what he would say.
Yeah. And just on that topic of exposition briefly, in the earlier shows, we used MacGyver voiceover to explain the thing. And you probably noticed as we continued, we tried to do less and less of that.
Sure.
Because we realized that our audiences were really smart, and they would pick up on stuff, that we didn't have to over-explain things.
Sure. Yeah, that's a smart move. I wish more shows nowadays knew that.
Well, I think that was something that we were always conscious of, as being respectful of our audience.
Yeah, definitely. Well, what brought about the idea for Easy Target?
Well, what happened was Michael Greenberg, one of our other producers, who was quite close friends with Rick, read an article in a magazine called Omni, was a science magazine, that was written by, do you know who Gordon Liddy is?
Oh, sure. He was even on MacGyver.
Yeah, and he, of course, was one of the Watergate burglars.
Yeah, my father always loved him because he always said, you know what? He kept his mouth shut. He didn't rat on anybody.
No, and he's the only one who did time in federal prison among all of the Watergate conspirators. Most of them went to Club Fed and stuff, and just went to white-collar country club prisons, but did hard time in a federal prison. Anyway, really interesting guy, and he wrote that article about how a terrorist could use an electromagnetic pulse generator as a terrorist device, because it would have all the impact of a nuke without the radiation. That's the premise behind it. But the funny thing was, of course, I read the article, but then I consulted with him over the phone quite a bit. And he, at one point, sent me a fax with all kinds of information. And at the bottom he put, should this information result in the destruction of Vancouver, shred this memo. I will deny everything. We had a good sense of humor.
He's a smart guy.
Oh, totally. Well, he was in both the CIA and the FBI. And then just to get ahead of ourselves a little bit, when I was writing The Wall, I called him up again to ask how a Stasi agent would kill somebody quietly. Mm-hmm. And he had way too many ideas. A little too well informed in that department.
Wow.
But the other thing he said when we were talking on the phone, and this is long before 9/11 and anything being recorded secretly by the government, he said as soon as we started talking about bombs, he said, you realize, of course, now we're being recorded. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, if you use the word bomb, it triggers an automatic system that will record any conversation.
Wow.
And this was in the 80s.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. But I like Gordon a lot. He was an interesting guy.
Yeah.
So that that one was particularly challenging because it was more political than we would get.
And that's the thing too. The villains were not just thugs, brainless thugs. I always appreciated the writing where they had, and I always say a good villain doesn't know they're the villain. They think they're the hero.
Sure. Well, they're always the hero of their own story. But like I teach writing now as well, and one of the things I'm always stressing with my writing students is that the antagonist-protagonist relationship, the antagonist defines the protagonist, because it's always got to be about values and conflict, not who's the good guy and who's the bad guy.
Oh, yeah.
Even in a romantic comedy, it's an antagonist-protagonist relationship.
Huh.
If
Yeah.
you think when Harry, it's not called When Sally Met Harry. It's an antagonist-protagonist relationship, and they have different values.
Because he was a jerk in the beginning of it. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, because they had different attitudes about relationships.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, you're right. That's pretty neat.
Yeah.
And the idea of letting Pete come up with the way to, they're holding the grenade behind their back in easy target. They're in the basement. And MacGyver's thinking, but Pete gets to it first. Was that your idea?
Honestly, it's so long ago I don't remember, because a lot of conversations about these things. I think probably, as I recall, one of the things I wanted to do with that script was to give Dana more to do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, because he's a good actor, but it wasn't always easy to incorporate him in the adventure part of the story.
Sure.
And so once we had him there, it just we looked for every opportunity to give him more to do.
Well,
So
when Sorry?
I'm sure it evolved out of that.
Oh, sure, yeah. And it was nice, too, because I'm noticing in a lot of your episodes, you gave us moments that we wanted. For example, in that one, you got to see Pete not just be the sidekick, he actually contributes more. And he was pretty proud of himself that he figured out what to do before MacGyver did. So he was like, look at that.
Yeah.
I got to figure it out. And then the next episode I'll tell you, when I started, like you said, way back when we weren't able to necessarily record the episodes. Well, when I did get a VCR, the first episode I recorded was Blood Brothers. Because I remember there was the writer's strike at the beginning of season 4. And they came out with the Secret of the Parker House as a Halloween special months before the actual 4th season started.
Yeah. And we, and that's one that John and I did. That was originally written by Cal Clemens, and we were having some trouble with it logistically.
Which episode?
Parker House.
Oh, okay.
And then Shepard and I did a full rewrite on that. I think Cal still has a story credit on it. And it was the writer's strike. And the other thing that always impacted us was the football. MacGyver always started later anyway.
Right.
Because ABC ran football first. And so MacGyver, all the other shows started in September, and MacGyver often didn't start till October.
Right.
Yeah. And so, and another reason that evolved early was because we would get because they would be fairly certain that we would be picked up, but they wouldn't always give us an official pickup until May. But what they would do is give us a script order in advance in anticipation of a pickup. So we never had more than maybe 6 weeks off between seasons. We were just going all the time.
Sure.
If that.
Well.
And so the script was there and we shot it, but I think it was actually shot after Blood Brothers, but aired before.
Oh, okay.
Sure.
No, you know what?
Yeah,
I agree with that. And sadly, I can tell because of the length of his hair.
Okay.
That's how I knew. I'm like, all right, his hair was a little longer with, on Secret of the Parker House. So it must have been a couple weeks at least.
All right. I'll take your word for it.
Well, yeah, when you watch them 100 times, you pick up on these things.
Yeah, I should have before we started talking.
That's okay. I'll remind you.
Okay.
So what was the idea with the Parker house?
Well, it was just basically we tried to do at least a couple of penny stories every year, mostly because Terry was so darn delightful, and she was a fun character for MacGyver because she was kind of like a little sister, and it gave us the opportunity to have a little fun with her. And what she was kind of a, I don't know, there's this old silent movie trope called The Perils of Pauline, where the girl gets tied in the railway track kind of character. The girl who's always in trouble, and then the hero has to rescue her, and that was Penny.
Yeah.
And so it's a part of the show from the beginning, and Terry was always doing pilots, and so we had to write her episodes when she was available because she was a really popular actress and always doing all kinds of guest stars and stuff. And a lot of fun, obviously. Yeah. And so it was, I think that was another reason why it may have popped up earlier, is because of her availability.
It's funny.
I think it, but yeah, the trick on that was, I remember John and I had to, one of the things we had trouble figuring out was why the guy was, we didn't want him to just be, a mutant or something. It was just tying in the whole lead poisoning thing.
Yeah.
Was, took us a little while to come up with that through research. I mean, we didn't make up everything. We had John Koivula, who was a research scientist. We had an organization called DeForest Research. And so we would come up with a general idea of what we needed, and then we would talk to the experts and say, okay, this is what we want to do. How can we make this happen or that happen, or how can this add up?
Yeah.
And we would kind of work both ends against the middle until we came up with a solution.
Well, you have written some brilliant episodes, and that was one of those twists that nobody could see coming, that it was lead poisoning.
Yeah. Well, that one of the things that I like best about the MacGyverisms, as I got used to the idea of that, was just to back up a little bit. When I first started on the show, I wasn't hired to write episodes. I was hired to do the location rewrites and go out on location surveys with the director and the rest of the department heads and rewrite for location. As if something was written to take place, I don't know, at a ranch, but we didn't have a ranch, but we had, a factory, then I would have to be rewritten for that. But then, of course, that would change all the MacGyverisms.
Sure.
The environment changes, the MacGyverisms change, and then I would have to brainstorm with the director and everybody else to figure out, okay, what can we do in this environment? And so, as I started writing my own episodes, I wouldn't write towards a MacGyverism. I would write myself into a corner and say, okay, what can he do?
Oh, that's great.
And the Steve Downing's general plan on MacGyverisms, he always said they have to be simple but memorable. And so, like there's one in an episode that I did a big rewrite on called Murderer's Sky.
Oh, sure.
Where I completely wrote myself into a corner because they were in an underground den, and there's absolutely nothing that they could do. And then I thought, okay, well, maybe there could be a stove in there. And if there's stove, maybe they had paper for wrapping the opium in. And then if he used soot on the paper, they could disguise themselves in the darkness behind the paper. And
that was your idea.
Well, yeah, but I mean, that's why you're a writer. But I mean, but then all I had to do is go to the art department and say, okay, there needs to be an old coal stove and some wrapping paper.
Sure.
And,
that's one of those. Go ahead.
Simply memorable.
Oh yeah.
It's not common, but it's within the keeping of how he would think in that circumstance.
Yeah, definitely. And that's one of those ones that are unique because it deals into martial arts and the Asian mysticism, which is a charm all by itself.
Yeah, and we had Key Luke in that episode too, which was wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
He had played the blind character in Kung Fu,
Mm-hmm.
and wonderful stories.
Oh, yeah.
He was in the movies in the 40s. His first movie he was in was with Greta Garbo.
Oh, really?
And he was in the art department at RKO. He wasn't even an actor. But because it was during the war, there were not a lot of Asian actors around. And so this guy from the producer went into the art department and said, he just liked his look, and he took him into the executive office and said, just play along, and you're an actor now. And he cast him in this movie, and he'd never acted in his life.
Huh. Wow.
And he told me he designed the premiere program for King Kong.
Wow, really?
When he was in the art department at RKO.
That's so
And
funny.
he was in his 70s then, at least, and he used to memorize a speech from Shakespeare every morning, just as a way of keeping himself sharp.
Wow.
Wonderful guy. So
Honestly.
many stories.
And it's something, too, because that episode, Murder Sky, that's one that the adrenaline is up through the whole thing.
Yeah, because not all of our shows had, again, that was another one that had a bit of a political intrigue with the tying into Tiananmen Square and what was going on in the news at the time. And I believe it was written by Herman Miller. But in production you do a lot of rewrites. That's just the nature of what you do when you're making a show.
Oh, sure.
And this job with that.
Huh. That and it's funny because it reminds me very much of the attitude of Indiana Jones, where one thing he gets out of one danger just to fall into the next.
That's the other thing. If you look at a lot of the most memorable MacGyverisms were the ones that didn't work. It's what he did when they didn't work that makes it interesting. It's when something screws up and then he does this other thing in the last second that does, it's kind of a misdirection.
That's great. But yeah, the one I was going to tell you that was the first one I ever recorded was Blood Brothers.
Right. We
And
got off on a tangent.
no, that's fine. Blood Brothers, you did such a great thing because you answered a 3-season question up until that point where, let's get into the guts of why doesn't he use a gun?
Yeah. And you probably know the story where that came from because it's out
Go
there
ahead.
in the world. But we were having a conversation and I asked Rick about, because he hates guns himself. I mean, if you see him around them, even he would cringe. And he told me this story of when he and his friends were out just shooting, not with a pistol, but with a 22 rifle or something like that. And he saw a bird, a couple of birds on a wire, I think, or telephone wire or branch, and he just randomly shot, not even thinking he'd hit one, and he did. And the other one just kind of reacted and flew away, and he was so sickened that he had so casually just killed something, even though it was just a kid not really thinking he'd hit it. And it just was something that he always felt strongly about, and just kind of broke his heart that he had done that. And so, because they were just going out to like shoot cans and bottles or something.
Sure.
So anyway, we were talking about that, and we were wanting to do an origin story of why he didn't use guns. And I had just recently been to visit my grandmother, who is not well, and kind of back where I grew up, and I started thinking of it in those terms, and then I got the idea of doing the time capsule flashback story that would give him the context, and then we told the parallel story of history repeating itself. And that was one of the things that I found most satisfying writing that one, was having the A story and B story, the present and past story, intercutting at the end, so that he was trying to save his friend's son's life simultaneous as we were playing out the story in the back. The backstory, black and white, with each of them having a different outcome.
It's so emotional too. I mean, we just watched it recently with the kids because, Mikey's 10 and Everly, my daughter, is 7. And so they're at that age where it's clicking for them. They're understanding. And, that was one that you're just silent as you're watching. You're like, okay, we don't know how this is going to go. Oh,
Yeah.
oh there you go.
And it was a daring thing to have a child killed on television by a gunshot in those days.
Well, I remember the big fuss about them not wanting to say the word gun. Or what was it? It wasn't gun, it was pistol.
Well, yeah. There was a coda at the end that said X number of kids who are killed in gun accidents every year. And the NRA wouldn't let us run that. And they had other complaints about it, but Steve Downing, our exec producer, fought them all the way, fought the network, and it was the network coming to us, and how the NRA heard about it. It's just ridiculous, because it was while we were in production that all this fuss started.
Wow.
Even before it wasn't just when it was going to air. It was early on during the improvement stages of the script, because every script has to go through the network approval process and the studio approval process. And somewhere in the mix of that, I guess word got to the NRA about, us not being pro-gun. I think, I'm a Canadian, so I have a different experience with gun culture. And I don't mean to make any judgments about American culture, but it's a lot different here.
Oh, sure. Yeah, without a doubt. In April, I saw Jason Priestley at a convention, and the line, I wish I had a chance to talk to him. His line was so long, but the only thing I would have said was, "You were on a MacGyver episode."
Well, that was his first American TV show.
Was it?
Yeah. Well, I've known Jason since he was about 12. And because my wife was a teacher, and she used to teach with his stepfather.
Oh, okay.
And so I would write episodes of Canadian TV and family dramas and stuff, and I'd say, "Oh, I know a kid who would be great for this," and get Jason in for the audition. And of course, he always got the part because I would write the part for Jason.
Sure.
And then the nice thing is we've stayed in touch over the years, of course, and the same thing happened with MacGyver. I mean, I'm not taking credit for his success. He was a talented actor then and now. But it was easy for me to say, here's someone who can do this, and that was the case with MacGyver as well. Anyway, he was doing a play in London a few years ago with Edie Falco. And I was in London with my brother, and I thought it would be fun to say hi to him, so I went backstage, not backstage, but to the stage door after a matinee, and all the girls are out there, of course, and I just said, "Oh, look, it's Jason Priestley." And he saw it was me, and he invited me and my brother in, and he remembered every single episode of everything that we ever did together.
Ah, see, he seems like a sweet guy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, one of these days I'll get to talk to him.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that even as a kid, it wasn't ego. You just knew he was going to be successful because he already knew he was successful. He just needed to wait to everyone else to know he was successful. But it was just confidence, well-earned confidence.
Now, you were part of 2 of the Murdoch episodes, The Widowmaker and Cleo Rocks.
Yeah, I didn't write Widowmaker, but I did a lot of rewriting on Widowmaker.
Okay.
That was one of the ones, just because of the logistics, and I thought it would be fun to talk about. I mentioned it mostly because we had to build the side of a mountain to shoot, and it was one of our biggest construction jobs early in the time that the show was there. Just after it first moved up to Vancouver, because now we can go to Whistler and shoot all of the mountain stuff and do big second unit stunts and falls and all of that stuff.
Is it actually called Whistler?
Well, the area is called Whistler.
Oh.
the mountain that we use is called the Chief, which is a very popular rock climbing mountain.
Yeah.
But we built a huge section of a whole one side of the outside of the soundstage, so that we could shoot the close-ups and the inserts and the detailed stuff of the climbing. And that was kind of neat, because having only written for Canadian TV, we didn't generally build mountains.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have the money to do that sort of thing. And of course, Michael was a lot of fun.
Well,
And was on that episode or not, but 90210 was shooting across the bridge from us at the same time. Not 902, I'm in Jump Street.
Oh, okay.
Jump Street. And Johnny Depp was friends with Michael. So Michael would go back and forth to talk with him, and sometimes he'd come to our set. And this is, of course, before Johnny Depp was Johnny Depp.
Right.
It's kind of fun.
Yeah. Well, what was your take on Murdoch as a character before? Because here's why I ask. Your episodes have been crucial to giving him depth. Like in Cleo Rocks, you actually get to see him fall in love with Penny Parker. As twisted as it is, it's a vulnerability that we hadn't seen before.
Yeah, honestly, it was just us having fun. I wish I could tell you there was some great depth to it, but my wife and I had seen Phantom, obviously, which was relatively new then. We had seen it in London, and I came from our holiday saying, let's do a Phantom of the Opera episode. So John and I thought the most logical person to do that with would be Murdoch. So,
sure.
And of course, it was a chance to do something with Terry, to show off her skills. And Michael, he wrote the songs.
Well, when I was talking to him, he said that was his favorite episode because he got to write the music for it.
Yeah. Yeah, he's just you know what he's like. He's a great guy.
Sweet guy.
Yeah, and he just ate it up. You know? And it was the whole flaming pool and the cave and the cage and all that nonsense. It was just fun.
Now, did you set up the traps? Did you write that part?
Of course, yeah.
Really? Because that's one of those traps where you go, all right, I'm done. I don't know how you're getting out of this.
Yeah.
And there's a time limit, too, because you're going to get squished.
Yeah, that was fun. We just kept thinking, okay, now what can we add to it? What can we add to it? Well, sometimes you work backwards from knowing what the final solution is, and then just like you would a murder mystery, you know who done it. And so you work backwards from that and build in the clues, and the same is the case with something like that. What's the cool way to end it? And then you work backwards from that. And also we're working with the effects department and everyone else, and everybody starts chipping in, and it gets bigger and bigger during that last week of pre-production when you're actually having to build it. Then everybody really starts weighing in, and the director gets involved, and everybody throws in their 2 cents worth, and it just happens.
Yeah, because I'll tell you, that one, if you had to pick the top 5 moments, that's one of them.
Yeah, and it was fun to have both Pete and Penny in jeopardy. And, everybody was in jeopardy by the time we got everybody down in that place. The theater where we shot in Vancouver is called the Orpheum, and it's an old vaudeville house from the 1920s. So it was really neat to shoot in that environment as well.
Oh, sure, yeah. And some great guest stars on there, too. I can't think of his name, but he was the guy who owned the theater. He was on from Mork and Mindy.
Yeah, wasn't Conrad Janis.
I can't think of his name.
I'll look it up.
He ended up being on Legend with Rick afterwards. He played the mayor.
Yeah.
But yeah, he did a great job on that too, because the way you wrote it, you understood from his side of it. He's a money man. He just wants the thing to be successful.
Yeah, and of course, the audience already knew that was Murdoch from the get-go. It's not like we were surprising anybody.
Well, you know what? I'll tell you something. That's not always true. My son didn't know, and he loved Murdoch. I was showing
really?
them. Oh yeah, I would show him actually the whole family, but for him it's the first time seeing it. So, we're watching all the Murdoch episodes in order. And when that episode was on, he didn't know it until he pulled off the mask.
Yeah, and that was tricky because you had to have makeup under makeup. Because you had to have the Murdoch prosthetic under another prosthetic.
The scarring underneath when he pulls it away.
Yeah. And as I recall, I think the outer part was done with a different material, silicone, and then the part under the first part, the Murdoch stuff was done with foam latex, and then it was a kind of a gel makeup on top of it.
Wow.
That he could just pop it with his kind of way.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, the way he performed it and the way it was written, you couldn't necessarily, it wasn't an easy thing. Like I knew when I first saw it because I knew him so well, and I thought, are they using Michael DeBar as somebody other than Murdoch? And then in the end you go, oh no, it was Murdoch. But it was great to watch the kids be shocked.
Very satisfying.
Yeah.
To know that, they fooled any.
Let's see what else. There's Jenny's Chance.
Right.
Jenny's Chance is a different episode because he's part of a team more in that one.
Episode.
It was a what?
And then it was like a Sting type episode.
Yes.
And two reasons for that. Of course, Dana was in the Sting.
Right.
The Sting. But also, I've been friends with Linda Blair for many, many years.
Huh.
An AD, I worked on a couple of movies with her. And so I would always write episodes for her. If I was working on a TV show, I did, after that, I did Sci Factor, a show with that Dan Aykroyd produced. It was a science fiction show, and I wrote an episode for her on that. Anyway, so I wanted to do something with Linda, and so she, with Linda, I had to be about horses because she loves horses. And I had read this story in the news about a horse that was winning races because it was deaf and the jockey had an ultrasonic signal in the riding crop that would, and the trick was he was riding a deaf horse and the other horses would be thrown off by it.
Wow.
And so that part of it was true. And so we decided to turn it into a Sting-like episode.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is I used that true story in 3 different other TV episodes.
Did you?
For different. Yeah. So you did. It's not cheating. It's a true story.
Yeah, there you go.
There's a show called Black Stallion that I used it on, and another couple of other Canadian shows.
I remember Black Stallion. They used to show that here.
Yeah. With Mickey Rooney.
And it's funny, too, because she was one of those characters that, because of the way Jack and MacGyver seemed so fond of her, I was hoping she would come back.
Yeah. We probably could have done, but it just didn't come up together that way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just one of those, I'm sure they see her after this. We just don't get to see it.
Well, we didn't do a lot of stunt casting type, name actors on the show anyway. And Linda she didn't get to do a lot of stuff because she got so pigeonholed with The Exorcist.
Sure.
That she do that kind of story. So it was fun for her to do something different.
Yeah. And
then the whole gag of, that we used Steve Blaylock, who was Rick's stunt double for the doppelganger character.
Oh, is that who that was?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I recognize the name, and I think I've seen some pictures, but I didn't realize that was him. I know it was him in The Endangered. You used him in the episode.
Yeah. Yeah, because it was the boyfriend who looked remarkably like MacGyver.
By the way, love that episode. I mean, love them all, but that is another one of those great personal episodes because it delves into MacGyver's mistakes in relationships.
Yeah.
Like he messed that up.
Well, that has a great backstory to it because I did an interview with a screenwriting newsletter in the States. Of course, I States because I'm here, but,
Yeah.
This writer who had submitted a spec MacGyver episode read it and tracked me down in Vancouver and called me and said, I submitted it properly through an agent or through lawyers or something, because ordinarily TV shows don't like to read a spec script being a speculative script written for a show without it being commissioned, just to show that you can write that kind of show.
Sure.
As a writer. And so he asked if I had read it, and I said I hadn't, and I phoned the LA office and asked them to send it up. And the producer down there said, "Oh, I think I saw it. It's not very good." And I said, "Well, I promised I would read it." And they sent it up, and it was The Endangered. And it was actually while we were in pre-production on Parker House and having trouble making it work for location and a number of other reasons. It was a difficult show to put into production quickly. But this one, because The Endangered was basically running around the woods, it was easy to shoot. Mm-hmm. And so I read it and thought it was great and showed it to Steve Downing, and he, same day he said, "Call the writer, tell him we're shooting his show next week."
Wow.
And that's what I liked about it. The same thing that you liked about it was he just, and it changed quite a bit, but the core of it was still what Peter Filardi wrote. And so I called him back, and he wasn't home, but I left him a message on his answering machine saying, "Yeah, I read your script. We're shooting it next week."
Wow.
Which is not a comment to make very often.
Yeah. No, I'm sure he was thankful for it.
Yeah. Well, the nice thing is because Steve Downing was so generous, even though he didn't need to, he flew him up from LA. He'd never had anything produced before. And he stayed and did some of the production rewrites with me, and went on all the location surveys and was there for the whole shoot. And then he went home and finished writing a movie called Flatliners.
Oh, sure. Yeah, with Julia Roberts.
Yeah, and then he wrote The Craft.
Another classic.
Yeah, so a good writer is a good writer.
Well, it's funny because in that episode, MacGyver is not the guy who's the victim in the relationship. He caused the hurt. And now he's on his knees basically groveling to her,
Well, that was all from Peter's original script. I love the whole idea. He has this near-death experience where he's almost shot in the bar, as I recall. Mm-hmm. And he just decides that he's going to reevaluate things and see if he can patch things up, and ends up in a whole other problem. And even the bad guys, quote-unquote, in there were not bad guys. They were hunters who had been pushed out of their natural hunting territory. Uh-huh. So it was just some people making bad choices. They weren't bad people. And I thought all of that worked really well.
And Don Davis was in that too.
Yeah.
Don Davis, who went on to work with Rick in Stargate.
Yeah. And I remember that was one of those ones where I ended up not knowing how to do a MacGyver. It was like he was trapped. And I figured, I can't remember how many different ways I had him use his zipper and the string of his jacket, and I just had him kind of take apart his coat and use it for a bunch of different things.
Which is great because anytime he's in the woods, it's always a favorite to MacGyver fans because you're alone in the woods. Like, you don't have anything to get. So you're right. The problem that you had figuring it out, we can't even comprehend what's going to happen. Like, how do you stop this? Like, he's got three or four guys after him.
Yeah, as I recall, I haven't seen it myself in years, but it seems to me he made a snare out of his coat or something. I honestly don't remember.
Yeah. Well, he ends up using a tranquilizer, one of the bear tranquilizers, too.
Yeah, no, it was fun.
Oh, it was great. That's a great episode.
One of the few preconceived MacGyverisms I did, I can't even remember which episode it was for. I don't think it was even for. It was when he has a cold and he's in the supermarket.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Third season.
Yeah. And I can't remember how it came up, but I just thought, I remember doing stuff in school, with baking soda and vinegar and stuff like that. And I just thought of it as a scenario without any story to put it into. And then my boss said, we need something at the head of this script. And I just said, how about this? And he said, you didn't just think of that right now. You have to have thought, no, that can't be off the top of your head.
It's great, too, because that's one of those episodes where you never get to see the hero have a cold. And in this one, you did.
About MacGyver, you could do that, too.
Yeah.
I mean, you could just a regular guy who you could do regular stuff with. But I remember, John Rich was a comedy director who was our other exec producer with Henry Winkler. Mm-hmm. And John Rich directed most of all of The Family and the Old Dick Van Dyke Show and stuff. And so he was always tuned into comedy stuff. And I had that one line where he says, to the clerk in the supermarket, where can I find eucalyptus leaves? And the clerk just says, Australia. And Don gave me such crap about that because he thought it was funny, but he hated himself for thinking it was funny.
Now, I'm sure I already know the answer to this, but Nikki Carpenter, she was supposed to end up as his girlfriend, right?
It's always the plan when Steve created that character. But I think I know I mentioned it online and you probably saw it, that we found that whenever we tried to give MacGyver a girlfriend, the fans didn't like it.
Yeah, the female fans. I remember Rick saying it on an interview because, as you know, from The Wall, one of the best things about that episode is he has a girlfriend by the end of it. And I thought...
a bad girlfriend.
Huh?
That's something I didn't agree with. I'd left the show by then, but I wrote that episode for the 6th season. And I didn't think she should be his girlfriend. I thought she could be, but I didn't agree with what we ended up doing with that character. Okay. Because I didn't think they left it so ambiguous about whether she was the granddaughter or not, mm-hmm. or whether she was good or bad. And I don't think the actress was strong enough to carry off that femme fatale mystery aspect. That was the only way that could work. Mm-hmm. And I just didn't see any chemistry between them in the episode either.
Yeah, I mean, he's very good to her, but again, through the whole thing, she's very schemy and hard to have a successful relationship with that.
Yeah, it would be different if you could have played her as a tragic character who had been brainwashed by Eastern Germans and part of the environment that she was forced to grow up in. And now she was adapting to the West. That's a different character. Mm-hmm. But they left it so ambiguous and MacGyver is too smart for that.
Right. Yeah, I can't... When she left, I thought, well, okay, it's bad because I liked seeing him with somebody, but at the same time, like you said, she wasn't the one.
No.
Yeah.
And they tried to get her back again, I know, after, but it just didn't play.
Yeah, and he did an interview where he was talking about Nikki Carpenter and her, and that the single females didn't want to see MacGyver attached to anybody because they had their own fantasies.
Yeah, in their mental fan fiction.
Yeah, isn't that weird? I would think it would have been a better thing to see him in a relationship.
That's a girl thing, I guess.
I guess, yeah.
I was, but I think also the MacGyver character wasn't a character that, and again, I don't have a woman's perspective on this, but I don't think the MacGyver character was a quote-unquote sexy character like a James Bond.
Right.
He was somebody who his appeal was more like he was like a big brother, he was like a friend, he was like somebody mm-hmm. who, the kind of relationship that made him universal. And I think was a big part of the appeal for women too. I mean, it was that he was somebody, not just that he was sure, obviously Rick is a very attractive person, and he's an actor, and he's charming and funny and everything an actor has to be.
Yeah.
But the character was not somebody that I ever perceived as somebody who was out to get lucky or to be in a relationship. He was about so much more than that.
I agree. Absolutely. And when you mentioned about Penny Parker, too, I always thought of it as him thinking of her as his little sister. It was never a romantic.
And that was also the vibe you got off of Terry, too, because she's just such a sweetheart.
Yeah.
Of course, it wasn't a romantic character. We had a lot of interesting guest stars because, of course, Mayim Bialik was on several episodes.
Yeah,
and
three of them.
John Cameron Mitchell, Hedwig.
Mm-hmm.
He was in the Hell Week episode.
Yeah, that's another personal episode that we actually dive a little into his history, too.
Yeah, with the teacher.
Well, I mean, just to see where he went to school and,
that was difficult episodes. Just the gags in that just drove us crazy.
Because
a lot of them.
Because what?
Because they worked on camera too. They weren't just because it was all the stuff like with the Lucite bomb and all that stuff. That was really hard to plan and execute, both for the art department and for us conceptually. A lot of the stuff that worked in that had to work in a different way than the basic MacGyverisms because they were thought through experimental things that were meant to be the works of geniuses, as opposed to just something that he's doing on the fly. And so that was particularly challenging.
Wow. You're right. And it shows that, too, because as you watch it, you go, he's not dealing with the average person. He's in a school of like-minded individuals, and he has to beat that.
But then ultimately, for all, and this is something that I think made the show memorable, too, is for all of that, it was really about the father-son relationship and having that resolution.
Yeah.
So no matter what, we always brought it back to character. For all of the bells and whistles and things that would make it MacGyver, it was always about relationships. It was always about people.
Yeah.
And that's what about Murdoch. Ape shit crazy.
That's Murdoch.
Yeah.
But
one of my favorite things in that Cleo Rocks was, it was like John and I almost said it simultaneously while we were writing it, with when they look at the pipe when they drained the pool, and no ordinary man could fit through a pipe that small. Murdoch is no ordinary man, whatever the line was.
You don't know Murdoch.
Yeah, we just were kind of cackling to ourselves as we were writing it. It was so much fun.
And you're right, because like I said, MacGyverisms are great, but it's the pacing and the relationships that matter more than anything.
Well, that's true of any TV show, and that's where most TV shows succeed or fail. I heard a podcast interview with some guys who would write CSI type shows. I can't remember which one of the many there are. And they said, if you like a cop show, I dare you to name one episode and name the crime. Because you remember how they reacted to the crimes. You remember what the crime of the week brought out that we learned about their characters because of how they dealt with or related to the crime.
Yeah.
And that's ideally what TV writing should be.
One of our holiday traditions is to watch the Madonna.
Ah, okay.
So tell me about that one.
Well, that was an idea of Steve Downing's. And with all due respect for the woman who's credited on it, I don't remember her name. That was one that I did an absolute page one rewrite on, that I remember really being engaged in writing it, and I wish I had my name on it. It's not the way it works. Sometimes you have to rewrite a script,
Sure.
And it wasn't her to begin with. Steve Downing remembered an old episode of Dragnet where baby Jesus was stolen from a creche scene at a church, and it was a Dragnet Christmas episode, if you can imagine. And the cops had to find this missing baby. And so he wanted to do an episode like that. And the script came in and it wasn't what we needed it to be, and I ended up doing a big, page one rewrite on it. But I always remember that scene at the end where he talks about when the priest tells him, that his mother...
Ice cream.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Every time.
When I think about it.
What'd you say?
And I get emotional when I think about it, and I wrote it. Because I was really happy with that. And again, it's MacGyver's backstory and why he doesn't like Christmas.
Yeah. Well, I'm telling you, you're getting choked up. I'm getting choked up because every time we watch it, you wanted to know what it is about MacGyver that makes me love it. That's what makes me love it. Right there. That heart, the sincerity of the character. And in that episode, it's no explosions, no gunfights. It's like even him with the little girl who comes over to give him the present. And he tells the story about how he used to wrap old comics as gift wrapping for his mother. And through the whole thing, you're wondering, okay, so he's not crazy about Christmas because he misses his mother. Okay, but then you find out the actual, like you said, that scene where he has to get up in the middle of I'll be home for Christmas and step outside and to watch Rick choke up. It's one of the only 2 times on the show that he's ever lost it, with tears. And I can't think of a better reason for him to be. And I brought this up, too, because you tell me definitively when Father something Irish says to him, MacGyver, I know this is a tough time for you about your mother. And he goes, I wasn't there, Pat. That's what his name was, Pat. And he goes, right. She needed me and I wasn't there. And he says, MacGyver, it wouldn't matter if you were there or not. She just kept mumbling things like your name and ice cream, and it clicks. Now, for years, I took it as she was saying ice cream because she needed help. No, it was that she wanted to give him that message. Right, which is by watching it this past year. Everything would be okay. That's the one. Yeah. And that's why he tells the story to the little girl, and she says, that's it. That's the magic word. Yeah, hey, it works. Yeah, that scene, when I watched it this year, I took it that way, where she was telling him it's okay. Yeah, that she understood. That he couldn't be. And to watch him just lose it, he just, Well, that's the thing. Couldn't do, and Rick was capable of anything that any good actor is capable of, but because the character was so even-keeled, it was hard to get to those things honestly, because you had to dig deep to get well, the other time. Yeah, go ahead. Really good. I think it was in I can't remember the name of the episode. It was the one with I think it was the Challenge. The Challenge. I was just going to bring that up because it's tied in. It's the same. Yeah. Like the Madonna is the sequel to the Challenge. Yeah, and it's when he sees what horrible thing has happened and he punches the wall. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, he's gagging as he backs up and then punches the wall. And I'm trying to remember, and I may be wrong, but it seems to me that's something Rick just did. I believe punching the wall. Yeah. I'm pretty sure. Wow. Either it was something that he just did, or it was something we talked about in the moment. But it just, it was fun to find those opportunities. And that was one with Cuba Gooding Jr. was in that one. Yes, he was. Yeah, before he played one of the Colton brothers, too. Yeah. Which is something.
another thing that was a bad idea.
Huh?
That Colton Brothers thing was meant to be a kind of a backdoor pilot idea
Yeah.
that would spin another series. I just thought it was the wrong idea. I don't know whether it's good or not, but it was shoehorned into MacGyver, and I don't think it was for a MacGyver audience.
Right. Well, they actually showed that the pilot was shot during the 6th season and shown during the 7th season. As they actually have the pilot, there.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked about it at the time, but it just all felt very forced from my perspective.
Yeah.
But it was, what it was the show was coming to an end, and the people involved creatively wanted to carry on. And so how could we use the container of the show as a way to jump into something new?
Sure.
In the way that, bringing in his son at the end, I honestly thought was kind of forced as well.
Did you?
Well, it just was so obviously, and I was gone from the show by then, so I don't have any judgment on it, but I felt like it was a forced effort to carry on the legacy. It was kind of transparently, it felt more economic than organic.
Sure. Well, I think, for me, I think it gave him the happy ending. Like, he wasn't going to leave the Phoenix Foundation unless something was more important.
Yeah, but of course I was gone from the show by then, so I had nothing to do with that. So it's just me, audience.
The other one you mentioned was the Black Rhino.
Yeah, I just thought that was worth talking about, only because we had the Rhino.
Yeah, and Cuba Gooding Jr. was in that too.
Yeah, that's right.
That was his first one as Billy Colton.
That's right. But the Rhino the Rhino, because we couldn't actually, we had this Rhino that had the horn cut off of it. And so it would cost a fortune. It was like $15,000 or $20,000 to build this animatronic rhino that was a dead rhino. And I can't remember. It seems to me we ended up giving it to some place to use as a display to call attention to, the fact that rhinos were being killed for their horns. I don't know what became of it, but we got letters because people thought it was real.
Right.
Which is just weird.
Well, but you know what? That says something to the quality of the special effects.
Yeah. And I remember it had built in LA and shipped up to Vancouver. It was a big deal.
Wow.
It was one of the. It was just, and that shows the range of stuff we could do in Vancouver, because we could do Africa, or we could do the Arctic, or the ocean, all within an hour of our studio.
Or you could do something like, I don't know, have Bigfoot be part of an episode. Ghost Ship.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that was a weird one. But what was neat about Ghost Ship was we actually, when we were trying to figure out how to do the ship, we found a ship that was still had a workable engine in it, but was going to be scrapped, and they actually bought that boat.
Really?
And fixed it up for the production. And we had the full run of the boat and just took it up into an inlet and shot everything on the boat, and then resold it at a profit because they had fixed it up enough. But just what you can do with a big TV show that has a little bit of spare change around. You can do that.
Well, I heard that, the scene where, again, perfect example of what I'm talking about that makes it magical. He is not talking for at least 15 minutes of that start of that episode, where he sees the boat, swims over, gets in it, starts investigating, and nothing is being said. That shows how good that show is, because you don't need him to say anything.
But it also shows how much we trust in our audience.
That's true.
And I think, and that's, I think, was something that came through. And again, that is all up and down the line, especially with Steve Downing. He was just such a smart guy who really, just knew instinctively what the right thing to do would be, even if it seemed a little risky at the time.
The payoff is there,
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, and Was it GX1, the one with the hot air balloon?
Yep, that was the one.
Yeah.
That was the last one, I think, with Nikki Carpenter too, because it came on really strong. That the Russian says, "You two are going to end up together," and I think that's when the audience went, "Nope."
Well, and that was, I mean, just even it's maybe people don't realize how big a deal it is to shoot a hot air balloon, let alone make a hot air balloon.
Mm-hmm.
And to have it, the idea that he created it and have it look like he created it.
Yeah.
And you have to have helicopters, you have to have air-to-air shooting. We did one of the Dalton episodes where we had to have, like, people jumping out of planes and
Sure.
stuff, and you're shooting in the air with camera planes and
That's
other
the one with the
planes.
baby, Rock the
Yeah.
Cradle.
Yeah, that was I think my first Dalton one. I don't know if you've noticed that Dalton was the only one who ever got to call him Mac.
Yep. Yeah. Well, because they knew each other from being kids.
Yeah, but still, the idea was that he was the only one that MacGyver would let him call him Mac.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because he didn't like to be called Mac, and
Huh.
Dalton never called him Mac ever.
Huh.
He always called him, and only Dalton never got to call him Mac.
Wow, that's something. Well, with Ghost Ship, is it true that Rick didn't know when the Sasquatch was coming through the window at him?
I doubt it. I mean, it would be in the script, obviously. It may have timed out that way that he didn't know precisely when the moment was. But again, this is many. I don't remember that specific detail. But this Sasquatch was always kind of lame anyway.
Yeah, somebody was saying that, well, through the whole thing, you're going, wait a minute, what is this? Is this really a creature? And then to find out, oh, no, it was a guy in a mask. I'm like, okay, thank you.
Yeah, it wasn't one of my favorite episodes.
No? Oh, it's great because it's weird because of that. But also, again, it's him in the woods. So to have him in the woods, you don't know what's going to happen.
That's true.
Yeah. But yeah, somebody was telling me recently, and you could see it. He's doing the scene, but he doesn't know when that thing's coming around the corner, and the way he reacts is,
Next time you see him.
Yeah. Well, I just saw him last, a couple weeks ago, and he had mentioned, he was saying about, my wife had asked him about a scene, about if it was planned or not. And he goes, no, a lot of what I do is just go with the moment. Like you mentioned that sooner.
Yeah. Hope you said hi for me.
Yeah. Well, had I known, I would have, sure. But he said you just kind of, what the script says, but there's little moments that you can't write. You just feel, and that's...
Yeah, and that was part of what was so good, because you trust someone like him to find those moments too.
Yeah.
And also finding the humor in moments, which he was also really good at in a very subtle way.
That's the key. It's the subtlety. It's not hamming it up. It's tongue in cheek.
It was never done as a kind of a showboat kind of thing. It was just him being creative and spontaneous. And the thing to remember with him too is that he was like the whole show. I can't think of another series that was so entirely dependent on a single character. Because usually, even if you have a lead actor, you've got an ensemble, you've got a lot of other regular characters and a lot of other elements that you can use to tell stories or whatever. But that entire series was based around his personality, his strength as a performer, and the fact that, he was not going to be a monster, because he could have easily been a nightmare.
Sure.
He could have held everybody up and said, I'm this whole show, I'm MacGyver. Try doing MacGyver without MacGyver, and just have an attitude or something, as many actors are capable of doing. And there was never a heartbeat of anything close to that with him. He was always believed in the show and believed in the teamwork, and never ever had a moment The only time I ever heard him complain was because we would always shoot here, obviously, in Vancouver, and because we wouldn't often start shooting until August because we had a late air date for the network. But once you get into like this time of year, November, by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, it's dark here because we're so much further north. And we have a lot of rain in the winter, so we ended up shooting most of the shows in the winter. And he just got so tired of the rain. Same thing happened with David Duchovny with X-Files. They just had enough of the rain and the cold and shooting at night and dark. And that was one of the reasons I think they took the show back to LA for the last season.
Oh, okay. I always wondered why.
I think that was a big part of it.
Sure. Because you're right. It does rain a lot in Vancouver.
That's why it's so green and pretty.
Yeah. Well, listen. I adore talking to you, but I don't want to be a pest and keep you on forever.
I just hope you found something useful.
Oh, all of it. I'm telling you, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you and to hear all these stories.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm glad someone cares.
Oh, always.
I'll make sure that you get in touch with John Shepard because he was with the show from season 4 to the end.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, I found him on Facebook.
He did some of the MacGyver movies as well. He's just a really great guy, real character, a lot of fun. He'll have more stories than I have.
Well, I was thrilled to hear them from you.
Okay. Well,
and thank you for, doing such important episodes. Not just fun episodes, but thank you for contributing so much to the character.
Well, I'm glad to have been a part of it, and it's nice to have something, that you wrote that people still care about over 30 years later.
Oh, definitely. And I'm sure down the line I'll be sending you a question or two here and there.
Sure. Let me know when it's going to be up.
I will. Yeah, it should be next week. The guy who would post it for me, he's out of town, so I would think early, Monday, Tuesday. I'll definitely make sure you know.
A lot of editing first.
Yeah. Believe it or not, no. You're easy. Other than the quietness when you went to get the cat, we're good.
All right. Take care.
Thank you so much. Thanks. You have a good night.
You too. Bye for now.
Bye. The MacGyver podcast is part of the Forever Adventure Network. Some original artwork by Joseph Arnold. Donations can be made at Patreon to Mac Jackson. Look for our group pages on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at MacGyver Podcast. Please subscribe, rate, and review. And remember, stay creative, everyone.
Do you love action and adventure? Then you have to try the Forever Adventure Network. It has everything, from podcasts to audio series to music. It's got blogs, fan groups, comic strips, and 3 different stores for your pop culture and adventure needs. Join us today. We'll be proud to have you as part of the adventure. The Forever Adventure Network. Welcome to the adventure.